Hi, and welcome to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm Ange MacCabe, CEO and co-founder of Intuitive Performance. I'm a performance coach, HR professional, whole person leadership facilitator, and your host. The Human Side of Business podcast is fueled by the genuine curiosity to understand how personal characteristics and skills can be leveraged to drive individual and team performance, tangible outcomes, and ultimately organizational success within business. Each podcast is devoted to sharing knowledge, expanding our learning edges, and exploring the trends in corporate culture towards growing the emotional intelligence of organizations. I'm so glad you're here. Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to have Tatyana Mamut here with us today on the Human Side of Business podcast. To introduce Tatyana, she is a transformative leader in Silicon Valley who drives innovation by understanding customers deeply and leading through empathy. She's a serial entrepreneur and building successful products at Amazon, Salesforce, Pendo, Nextdoor, and IDEO. She has a PhD in economic anthropology and currently serves on company boards and advises tech companies to achieve growth through human-centeredness. She's also been featured in or on places like Inc., Fast Company, Co-Design, C-Suite, Forbes, Past Speaking, Global Peter Drucker Forum, and World Economic Forum, and of course, others. Welcome, Tatyana. We're so excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Likewise. So we're going to dive right in and start to chat about empathy when it comes to leadership. But before we get there, I'm really curious to understand, for you, what was the aha moment to transition from the PhD in economic anthropology to where you're at today?
Well, it was a bit of I would say an act of grace, or, like a random accident, perhaps, but I don't think anything is random in this world. And so I was finishing up my PhD at UC Berkeley. I was a National Science Foundation fellow, and I was considering a job as a tenure track professor down in San Diego. And I got a call from an amazing recruiter who focused on design recruiting. And she somehow had heard of me, and she asked if I would be willing to interview for a role at IDEO, the global design agency. And I said, I am not a designer. I know nothing about design. I don't know what I would do in a design agency. And she said, no, they're actually looking for people with an anthropology and brand background. And I had worked in Russia in global advertising and set up the brand planning whole discipline practice in Russia. So I was very confused about that call. And she said, well, why don't I set you up to talk to the CEO of IDEO? And I was like, well, if I'm going to talk to the CEO, of course I'm going to take that meeting. So I drove down to and I talked to Tim Brown, the CEO of IDEO, and we just hit it off. I mean, he and I had an amazing hour together, and we are still friends. In fact, you mentioned the Global Peter Drucker Forum. The reason I was there is because Tim Brown has been long affiliated with the forum, and he kind of introduced me to them, and so Tim and I are still friends, and so it was all through this sort of incredible connection and people really seeing the spark and the potential in others. Even though I had no background in design, I went to go work at this amazing design agency. And when I started there in 2007, I started working on lots of social impact work, right? Since I was an anthropologist, I did a lot of the work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Africa and Cambodia and Southeast Asia, and then also in public housing here in the United States, those types of projects.
Wow.
But it was also 2007, which is when the iPhone launched. And what we actually found was that people all over the world just wanted to talk about mobile technology. Like I was in Kenya doing a water project for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation with farmers. And I was supposed to be talking to them about farming and water. And all they wanted to talk about was M-Pesa, which was the mobile money product that had launched in Kenya in 2008. And so like, it was just again and again and again, the issues of technology and how, ever present technology was in people's lives all over the world kept coming up. And of course, our clients started saying to IDEO, well, we want to do these mobile projects, like mobile application projects, and designing them. And of course, nobody knew how to design mobile applications in 2007. And so I raised my hand and I was like, I'll lead these projects. Sure. I mean, like, I'm not in it, but neither is anybody else, but I can figure it out because my expertise is really listening deeply to what people are doing and kind of how the culture is forming and transforming around us. That's my sort of superpower. And why I went into anthropology grad school, to kind of really hone that superpower. And with that, basically, that is what great product leaders do, is they understand humans, they understand how culture is being transformed, and they build the products that are just slightly ahead of where the world is today, because it takes a long time to build products. So if you build something that's relevant now, by the time you get it out to market, it's not going to be relevant anymore.
Right, exactly.
So that's sort of my journey.
That's fantastic. And so leaning into the kind of leadership culture side of things, how did you, in your experience, how did you ensure that empathy was still existent, especially in that tech space?
Yeah. There are two pieces to the empathy. And I have to say that one, I was much better at earlier in my career. And then because I didn't appreciate the second one early in my career. So the first one is empathy for customers and empathy for the people that you are serving through your products. And I have always been very focused on that. I feel very honestly, whenever I'm in any situation, I find people and their lives fascinating, and I can have a conversation with anyone in the world. I lived with Mongolian herders for a while when I was an anthropologist, and they were fascinating. And then I, also talked to the executives at Citibank in Russia who were setting up the entire credit system in Russia, and I found them equally fascinating. And so, like, I find, and I've lived with monks in Korea, and I found them really equally fascinating. Like, I find all aspects of the human experience just fascinating, and I, have really feel that empathy of understanding what is human experience is the key to product development. And you know who agrees with that? Jeff Bezos. Because when I was at Amazon in 2017, he put out a shareholder letter, which everyone should read, the 2017 Amazon shareholder letter. And there's a section there that says resist proxies. And he says what he wanted to do was he wanted to refocus the company on real empathy for customers, as opposed to just customer dashboards and statistics and surveys and numbers. His point is great product leaders really have the intuition around their customer. They love their customer. They love their product. They go and they live in the life world of the customer. And that's how you develop a great product. So I've always found that, just inherently in my bones, something that was really important and really came naturally to me. What didn't come so naturally to me, especially as an early leader, was the side of the empathy for the internal organization, right? Because I always saw, when I was younger, I always saw the internal organization as just a means to the end of serving the customer, right?
Okay.
And, and I, I didn't really appreciate how much love a leader needed to put into their actual team and their actual organization. And I'm going to show something to you. I'm going to take off a bracelet that I made for myself to remind myself of something that I learned. And it's the only thing that works is love.
That's beautiful.
Because what I've learned as a leader is that what doesn't work is trying to tell people what to do. What doesn't work is trying to like make yourself, put yourself on a pedestal and try to motivate people through this like strong personality. What does work, what I found is that some of those behaviors you can have, but people feel a different energy from you when it comes from an act of love. A lot of people talk about this as servant leadership, right? But what is servant leadership, right? It's really about having this perspective that I work for my team, right? And I am there to really create the environment in which they will flourish. And we know from tons and tons of scientific research that the only environment in which humans and all other animals and plants flourish is one where there is love, sunlight, right? And, and when you're surrounded by those elements of love and sunshine, right? Radiance. People actually flourish. That's when ideas flourish. And that's when the community of the people who are your team can actually do your best work and their best work.
I tend to agree, Tatyana, 100%, because 9 times out of 10, and I had this experience in a group coaching session, 9 times out of 10, people know when they're messing up. And conversely, only like 1/3 of people actually know and feel that they're doing a good job. So when you're speaking to it from a place of love, that resonates with me. And I want to pause there for a second. How do you define love in the workplace? What does that actually look like? So
for me, love is an energy, right? Love is not, an emotion. It shows up as an emotion. It shows up as actions, but it's the energy that you're bringing to every conversation. It's the energy that you're bringing to every interaction. And it doesn't mean that you're a soft leader and that everybody is fine and nobody gets any critical feedback. In fact, love means that you are honest, right? One of the assets of love is that you don't hold back, right? Love and truth resonate at the same energetic frequency. And so you are not actually, loving someone, or putting out a love energy when you're trying to hide difficult realities, right? And so love is an energy. It's the energy that you bring to your conversations. It's the energy that you bring to when you're talking to your team, right? Like and again, it doesn't mean that you're always like, and by the way, being nice is not that energy.
No.
Being nice is not the same energy as love.
Right.
In fact, if you're trying to be nice, right, that is, a much lower
vibrational frequency. It is. I understand it. I do. Yeah. It is.
And so it's not about being nice. It's about being open, honest, transparent, right? And doing it in a way where you are opening yourself and inviting this, this exchange with the other person from a place of, true caring, of trying to accomplish something together. And the easiest way to do this as a product leader, and as any leader in an organization, is again to align those two things: the internal, kind of love for the team with the external love and empathy for the customer, and say to the team, look, we are not, doing the right things for the customer, right? We need not just to build value for the customer, but what does it mean for us as an organization to really have customers feel that we care for them, that we love them, that they are important to us. And then you have the honest conversations about then how do we need to show up in the world?
Right. And what I'm understanding is connecting the customer to your team members in one circumstance and the value behind that. And it's not disingenuous around understanding the psyche behind your customer and selling to them to increase your ROI or your bottom line, but rather really stepping into their shoes and being so passionate about that product or service that you're delivering or creating, making, what have you, that you'd really truly understand what's motivating them and expressing the love. You meet them where they're at to help leverage them through your product or service. I'm also hearing that when it comes to team members or employees, the love is around ensuring that they know that they're heard, seen, and validated, and that there's connectivity, but behind the success of continuous elevation within their growth. And I'm also hearing that love or that empathy piece is really about coming from a place of candor. And sometimes candor means that leaders have to step into an uncomfortable position of vulnerability. And that it can be also two-way, I think, is what I would add to that, because, you know, in seeing in past, and I'm wondering your experiences more so than anything, Tatyana, when a leader opens themselves up to two-way conversations, then that leverages, that elevates that love piece, I feel, because it gives that team member a safe space to understand that they're not just being heard based on a product or a KPR or OKR, whatever it is. Rather, they're being heard as a human being as well.
That is exactly right. And I would build on that one of the things, and I'll tell a personal story here. One of the things that I think has been very misunderstood in the business literature is psychological safety, right? We know psychological safety is really important for team success and for high performing teams. But I think that we have misinterpreted what many people have misinterpreted what psychological safety means. Mm-hmm. I believe, and what I do on my teams, and I'll give an example, is that psychological safety means that everyone feels safe to speak their truth and to point out and challenge each other, no matter who's being challenged. And so what I frequently do with my, in my team meetings, right? When I'm a leader, I set up many like cadences for team meetings of when I get together, not just one-on-one, but, when we as a team discuss what are our plans, we discuss sort of what are we doing, we discuss where the organization is going, and we challenge each other and we give each other feedback. And one of the things that I do is I often, if I hear in a one-on-one that a junior product manager has disagreed with something that I want to do, I'll ask that junior product manager in the meeting, if they're particularly outgoing. So what do you think of this plan? And I will, like, when they say something, right, that's critical, I'm like, wow, that's a really good point. And I celebrate people who publicly criticize me. Right. I think any leader who is not comfortable with being publicly criticized by the most junior members of their team is not really understanding the point of psychological safety. Psychological safety means that everyone feels safe to challenge anyone else. That also means that I feel safe to challenge them publicly, which may also feel, difficult to people. However, if we have an environment in which this is just part of the culture and this is what we do, it's not about me criticizing you as a human, right? It's about us having this dialogue and discourse, no matter who it is. Now, if it's not one thing that I will say is if it's not a particularly outgoing product manager, I'll often give them a heads up. I'll say, hey, like, I heard that you had some really great feedback for me. I want you to bring it up in our team meeting.
Yes.
And sometimes they'll be like, really? And I'm like, really? And then they'll be like,
I love how excited you are.
And then they're really surprised. And honestly, like I use those, and then I actually use those interactions to help people get promoted. Because I think as a leader, I think that like having, you know, when you go into these calibration discussions with other VPs, right? And you need to justify someone's promotion. One of the most compelling stories you can make as a leader is, well, this associate product manager challenged me and challenged this idea that I had, and he was right. Right? Or she was right.
Right. Exactly.
And now, right. And like that is really impressive to other VPs in a promotion conversation.
Exactly. And I mean, I think there's a couple things coming up for me, but there's so much to talk about. And I'm loving this, Tatyana. But what's coming up for me too is, contextually speaking, I think psychological safety also means that there's a level of respect. And you really pointed to it when you said something to the effect of, it's not, I'm personally attacking you, your, you know, how you're going about this, your person, your competencies, your wherewithal, or what have you. Rather, I'm having discourse or disbelief or want to debate this thing that we're talking about. And I think that's really important to set the context, because so many times I've seen in tech environments that it starts with discourse, or it starts with a healthy debate, and then it turns into a personal attack because one person is feeling like they're not loved, or there's less power in their conversation. And so I think it's really, from a leadership perspective, something to notice, to be able to call that out or call people higher. And the context may be, again, if someone's outgoing within that meeting, that maybe there's a safe word or something like that. Or, you know, maybe you ask people to parking lot a particular topic and then go back to it. Because I definitely think that there's some gray areas when it comes to that psychological safety when we're speaking from a team level debate perspective.
Yeah, I agree. You brought up a really important word, which is power, right? Like, so a leader needs to be really, really cognizant of how they're using their power. Because leaders have a lot of power. And again, this is something that I was not great at certain points in my career. And I have to say, like, even a few years ago when I was under a great deal of stress, right? It's really hard to not just want to like use your power to get things done and like direct your team in a way that people now feel like, oh my God, this person is coming in with a lot of power in a way that, you know, kind of, it doesn't feel kind of, again, that psychological safety that you establish as a leader. It needs to be like, people need to know, like, when are you consciously using your power to make a decision because that's your role. But when you're talking as just human beings, right, and debating a new idea, that's when you need to, as a leader, really establish that you're on the same power dynamic.
That's valuable.
And be really consciously aware of how you're flexing that power in different situations and to what purposes, and be able to explain it to your team. Like sometimes I will say, like, now I'm stepping into the role as the chief product officer and I'm just going to make this call.
Right.
Like sometimes I would literally say that. Like, hey, we were talking and debating as just like normal product, like as product people, Now I'm stepping into the role as the most senior person in this room. Right. And I'm going to direct this in this way.
Definitely. And I think that's really valuable in the sense of your 2 points, being cognizant of power and how you're utilizing it for good intentions is what I'm hearing. And then also too, in some circumstances, as a leader, we have to make those decisions, or we have to call those shots, or we have to postpone further conversations for whatever reason, or influence conversations to move forward. As you're speaking, I'm kind of curious to understand further. Again, in the tech industry, how do you influence this concept called love amongst leaders and, I guess, your management team?
So one of the examples that I use almost all the time, if you look at a lot of my talks, when I talk to tech teams, is that of a captain trying to take a ship to a certain location, and how people come in with different points of view and have very, very certain and confident perspectives on where the ship should go.
Mm-hmm.
What I find on tech teams is many people think that they have the right information and that they are smarter than the leader.
Mm-hmm.
I think tech reads this, right? Because in tech, a lot of people think that experience doesn't matter very much. It's like young people who can figure things out and hack their way to things. And we can talk about that another time. But the point is, a lot of people, like the people from marketing, will be like certain that we should do this.
Mm-hmm.
And then the people from engineering are like certain that we should do this. And then the people from, another team like customer success are absolutely certain we should do this. And one of the things that as the captain of the ship that you have to help explain to people, and this is where love comes in, is the reason we're not doing what you're saying is not because we don't respect you. It's not because we don't love your customer that you're seeing. I believe that you are seeing what you're seeing. I believe everything that you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that the other functions are seeing are equally valid. And we need to learn how to connect and bridge those gaps. And my job as a leader is to take in all of those inputs and steer the ship in one direction, because the ship cannot go in 4 different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And you are right. Like anytime somebody comes to me, I say, you are right.
Mm-hmm.
But other people are right as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where the love comes in. Like, you need to really understand that people are never saying things because they're dumb.
Right.
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 Saying things because they have different information.
Mm-hmm.
And if you really like have empathy for the information that they have, their on the ground context for what they're living in and the pressures that they're dealing with,
Mm-hmm.
then you can understand why this is a really hard choice, even though it seems so easy given the information that you have.
Right. Exactly. And I think it's an amazing opportunity to highlight those 2 things in the sense of consistency of love or trust. And also from a leadership perspective, really enjoying how you articulated. Yes, you're right. You matter, but so do they. Because what I'm hearing is each department has their own different lens. And as a captain of the ship, it's your responsibility essentially to be able to look at it from 60,000 feet in the landscape and take all the information and either take one approach, coach approach, making suggestions and getting feedback, or taking more of a diplomatic or authoritative approach to say, okay, this is the decision because, and I would love it if you could support this because. So I think that's a phenomenal way to look at things and be able to really hone in and focus on the cohesiveness of teams, because especially in the tech industry, to your point, there can be opportunities for more divide versus less when it comes to communications and vantage points, for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing about it is also that I always say, like, assume that everybody is as smart as you. Assume that everybody, right? Like always assume that everybody has the best intentions and that everyone is as smart as you. Now, what would make you think that other direction would be the right direction?
Right.
Because that's probably what's going on.
Right.
Right. It's like bridging gaps to kind of get out of the head of like, well, here's the data that right, to like, well, what might other people be experiencing that you're not experiencing?
Oh, yes. I think that's powerful. And to articulating from a place of leadership, oftentimes what can happen is that judgment piece can seep in. And, I've heard managers in past be like, don't come to me with problems, come to me with resolves, right? When in actuality, I think what they were trying to say is, I think that you're equally as intelligent as I am. I would love to hear what you have to say or what resolve you have with this issue. Come talk to me about this. And if you hit a wall, I'll certainly help you out. Like those two things sound like they're polarized, right? And so what I've seen in past is that some blind spots can happen is that when you're so used to doing things a certain way or at a certain speed or levels of expertise, you forget what it's like to be at a more junior level. And so I think what you're saying is quite humbling from a leadership perspective in love and empathy, is that you don't lose sight of how other people are feeling and what they can actually bring to the table if you focus on their strengths versus focusing on the weakness or the learning edges that they have there.
I also want to just talk about that. Don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions or whatever. I explicitly tell everybody who works for me, like, don't do that. Come to me with problems. Like, don't just run on. Like, you are not alone.
Right.
Like, you work a team for a reason, because your team is here to, be storm, help you think through ideas. Like, we're here. You work on a team. Bring problems to the team. Right. So that, and if you have a solution, propose the solution. We'll give you feedback on the solution. We'll help you through it. Right. Like, that is part of the psychological safety. Like, you don't have to have it all figured out. In fact, it's best if you don't have it all figured out, because people who try to muscle through and have it all figured out all the time are not they're not very likable leaders. Like, how many leaders have you worked for who think they have it all figured out all the time?
There's low trust.
They're terrible.
For sure.
Yeah, there's low trust. So like, you're not developing anybody by telling them that you don't want to hear their problems.
Right.
Nor creating a psychologically safe team dynamic when you're telling people that you don't want to hear their problems. Like, that is like the worst thing that I'm just like, the first time I heard that, I was like, who does that? And then I'm like, then why do you even need a boss? Like, why do you even need a manager? The manager is just there to hear about your results. Like, you don't.
I enjoy your lens on this. There's always a flip side.
What am I here to do? Just be like, good job. Now let me go take credit for your results. Like, what am I even here for? Like,
Exactly. I love it. One thing that was coming up for me when you were speaking is, when it comes to elevating our leadership styles, what would you have to say for someone that's not blatantly used to leaning into empathy or love, as you call it? Like, where do you start? How do you strengthen that muscle per se?
I'll tell you how I worked on it. Because again, this is on the internal side, I didn't really I always aspired to be this way, but I didn't really fully know what it meant, because, when I was younger, I really did like to be like seen as very smart, right? When you're like in your 20s, 30s, right? You're like,
of course,
you get a lot of like pats on the back when you're like super smart. And then, as a leader, I started to say, like, when I started going into that, like, that judgmental phase of like, I can't believe this person is saying this. This seems like the dumbest idea ever, or something like that. Like, where you have this thing in your mind as a leader, start to think in a judgmental way about someone that, is either a direct report or on your team, or, is working with you on something. Like, the whole thing that I try to do is, I'm just like, let's step back and try to figure out, like, what's the context, right? That made this solution seem like the right solution.
Right.
And so, like, again, it's like that assume that everybody is super smart. Everybody who's coming to you, just assume that they're super smart. They're just seeing different context. So how do you, like, go from, like, instead of going like to, like, criticizing the problem or asking for, like, we're trying to, like, poke holes
yes
in the argument, instead of trying to poke holes in the argument or asking questions that poke holes in the argument, you sort of zoom out and you say like, what are the things, like, tell me what you saw that got you to this place.
I love that. It's curiosity. That's what it comes down to, for sure. Yes.
It's curiosity. It's like curiosity about like, what is the content? Like, what did you experience that got you here?
Yeah.
What did you see? What conversations did you have? Like, what got you here?
I like how you went from making asserting statements to flipping the switch to understanding questions. So, I can automatically assume that it starts with understanding questions, and then maybe there's questions that understands their beliefs or their expectations, depending on, context, environment, and how much you actually have to talk about that subject with them. And then also too, in discovering more questions as to how to influence. So still allowing them to walk away with like a higher level of autonomy and feeling validated and powerful for them within themselves, versus, what I feel would dampen innovation and expression if we come out from a more critical or judgment perspective.
Exactly. And then the other thing is like, you're like, okay. And like, say you still like, you're like, okay, hear their context. I still really disagree with them. And I think this is a dumb idea, right? Like instead of like,
because it can happen.
It can happen. It does happen, right?
Right.
Instead of trying to poke holes, then like say like, well, let me ask you a question. What if then you try to give them your context. You're like, okay, I understand your context. Now let me try to give you some more context and see if your recommendation changes. And honestly, since I've been doing that, I would say 8 times out of 10, right? The conversation ends is like, oh, let me go back and right? Like honestly, right?
Amazing.
Like I just did a review of a new feature that was shipped with one of the companies that I'm advising. And, I was like, oh, like this, like there are some problems in this, design, and it's a V1, but they shipped it.
Right.
And so I started asking like, some like, well, what if this happens? Well, have customers given any kind of feedback like this? And she was like, they have. And I'm like, well, could it be because of this? And she was like, oh yeah, it could be. I had not thought of that. Let me go back and reconsider, what we do about this with my engineering team.
That's amazing. Absolute amazing insight. I know, Tatyana, I could chat with you for hours about this stuff. I totally geek out with you. But before you go, because I know you have a busy schedule too, let our subscribership know a little bit about more of your services and where they can find you.
Yeah. So I am teaching some courses for Reforge on product leadership, where we'll be talking a lot about all kinds of things like giving feedback to people and how to build a great team and how to design a great organization. So I'm going to be teaching that course. It starts in about a month and a half, or from the time we're speaking, so late March. And I'm also teaching mastering product management for Reforge. I sit on boards as well, and advise companies both through investment firms like Riverwood Capital, First Hand Alliance, 24 and Up, which is a great venture studio. And then I also advise a couple of clients, the chief product officers primarily, on, basically kind of building really high performing teams, doing product transformation, and really driving diversity and inclusion, not because it's a nice thing to do, but because honestly, like I've never hired for diversity at all on my teams, and my teams have been incredibly diverse. Like from the very beginning. And I do think it's about how you show up as a leader in the world, who you attract, who's attracted to you as a leader. And then the other thing is like, I think it's because I've lived and worked in so many different parts of the world. like, I really know how to again, I find everybody fascinating, no matter who they are, no matter what part of the world I'm in. And so I feel like I know how to listen to people who aren't like me and who don't come from backgrounds like me. I think that's actually why. I haven't had that, like, I would always get so offended at Amazon when somebody, like, when a recruiter would like pass me a candidate and be like, well, this is a diverse candidate. And I'm like, what does that mean? Is it because she's a woman in tech? Like, I don't understand what that means. I'm like, are they the best candidate? Like, I don't understand. And so, like, I've never done that, but like, I've always had, again, like, the outcomes of, like, if you look at my teams, they're just, in every company I've worked
organically diverse. Amazing.
It's organically diverse. And so I really want to help other leaders figure out how to do that without feeling like they're checking a diversity box or
boxes,
worried about diversity.
Exactly.
Like, my perspective is, you don't have to worry about diversity if you show up in the world with the right energy and in the right way. And if you listen,
yes,
in a way where it's really about the person's ideas and perspective, like, as opposed to what you expect them to say.
Exactly.
I think so many leaders are expecting people to speak or communicate a certain way, as opposed to like really listening to what they're saying.
I understand you, for sure. That's amazing. And if someone was looking to reach out to you, what's the best way to get a hold of you, Tatyana?
LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I post a lot. If you want to connect with me, just, write a reason why, because I do get a lot of sales requests. And so I can't connect with everyone. So if it sounds like a sales request, like, I'm probably not going to connect with you. And if you're a salesperson, like, please don't try to sell me anything. I don't have a budget. I'm not buying anything. But yes, LinkedIn is a great way to get in contact with me. And then I have a lot of resources and tools and things like that on my website, tmamut.com and culturerisk.com. And there's lots of videos of me on YouTube as well, about different topics.
Fantastic. So. Thank you so much for your time today. We're grateful to have the opportunity to chat with you.
Yes. Thank you for having me. Hopefully this was interesting to the folks listening out there.
Take good care. Thanks for listening to the Human Side of Business podcast. I'm glad you could join us. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay updated with our latest content, make sure to visit our website. The link can be found in the episode description, where you can subscribe to the podcast, sign up for our newsletter, and learn more about our whole person leadership services. Sounds interesting? Explore the Whole Person Leadership Cohort by Intuitive Performance, a unique program that offers unparalleled support to managers on every step of their leadership journey. Our program features evidence-based assessments, workbooks, group coaching, and interactive learning experiences to help you level up your leadership skills. Reach out today to apply to one of our upcoming cohorts. Until next time, take care and stay curious.